Okay.
Small residential guys.
Yeah, that would be great. I can't get anybody to come back. And then when they do, they're not, it's not completely prepared. And then they just don't come back. So it's almost there. It's like after 6 tries now, it's almost there.
So people parts down, so like your wallpapers down or something.
No, not that bad. No, like they actually, like they would, it's a plumbing booth. That's all it is, a plumbing booth. And it's just like, they can't get it straight. So I've been through like 5 or 6 different members, and it's almost there. It's like so much better, but it just needs like
Still leaking.
a little bit. So, yeah, it's been 2 years. But I've got somebody that I thought was really good, and somebody that used to work here with me, and said he recommended, and I really liked them when they came by. I was just like, okay, that was August. And
The challenge is
No worries.
leak may not be around. Seriously.
Thank you so much.
I don't know. Yes, yes.
The sooner the better. No, it's been months. Like they don't so I gotcha. But the same, they didn't, so these people didn't come back for you? No, eventually. It's been like, yeah. I'm so embarrassed. I know, I'm so embarrassed. You're having to keep going. It's so embarrassing. They've actually come out twice. But it's been since August. The other people I just gave up on. Okay, recording.
All right, it's 5:15, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the December 6, 2022 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals. Zoning present here today are Allison Grass, Howell Morrison, Robin Richards, John Bennett, Bill Goodwin Jr., Chappie McKay, and me, your chair, Jeff Tibbles. Present from the planning staff today are Lee Batchelder, Penny Ashby, and Omar Muhammad. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak identify yourself for the record, please. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and we hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open, in open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals zoning has the authority to do 3 things. Number 1, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number 2, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And number 3, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the zoning ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on the matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, The authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. This evening, we do have one deferral. We have a deferral of item number B5 on the agenda. So if you're here for B5 on 24 Chalmers Street in the French Quarter, that application has been deferred. I'm also required by our zoning ordinance to swear in any witnesses who are going to speak today so that they may speak under oath. And so I'm going to ask you, if you intend to speak, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You'll signify by saying, I do. Thank you. All right. So beginning of the agenda tonight, we've got the approval of two sets of meeting minutes, one from November 1st and one from November 15th. So let's start with A1, review the minutes of the November 1st, 2022 meeting. We do have a few who did not attend, so let me remind y'all who can vote because who attended. So attending on 11-1 were Grass, Richards, Bennett, Goodwin, and McKay. And so do I hear a motion on approval of the November 1st, 2022 minutes? For approval. All right, do I hear a second? All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, who made the motion? Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Bennett made the motion. Mr. McKay seconded the motion.
Thank you.
Now, of the folks that I named, you may vote. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion great passes. The minutes are approved. The next item is A2, review of the minutes of the November 15th, 2022 meeting. And the attendees included Morrison, Tibbles, Richards, Grass, and McKay. Do I hear a motion to approve the 11:15 minutes? All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Do I have a second? Ms. Grass seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The minutes are approved from the November 15, 2022 meeting. And the next item on our agenda is new applications. B, new applications. Number 1, 7 Calhoun Street, TMS number 458-01-02-064, requesting the fifth one-year extension of a vested right that expires on December 31st, 2022, pursuant to section 54-962. The vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on December 4, 2007, for a 100-unit accommodation use in a PUD, Planned Unit Development Zone District. The owner is RB Charleston, LLC. The applicant is Hellman and Yates, PA.
This application concerns a property at the corner of Calhoun and Concord Street. Back in 2007, a special exception was approved by the board for a 100-room hotel on this site. And that is the approval that is being requested to be extended. And you're wondering why that was 2007 and why it's still eligible for an extension, probably. The reason is that during the recession, 2009, 2008, starting at that period of time, the General Assembly passed took some sort of action, I can't remember the exact wording, to basically stop the vested rights clock for a period of time from ticking. That 2-year vested rights clock was stopped and suspended. And then in about 2013, 2014, they took the same action to extend the period of time in which that vested rights clock was stopped. So it didn't start again until 4 years ago, roughly. And so this is the fifth and final extension that is available to this vested right. And we feel that they're entitled to this extension, that they meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and we recommend approval of the extension.
All right, Lee, does the underlying land development ordinance or regulations been amended in a manner that would prohibit the execution of the site-specific development plan?
No, they're not.
All right, do we have the applicant here? Comment, is anything like you'd like to say to the board?
No, but I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Anybody here in opposition to this extension of the vested rights? All right, I see no one here in opposition. Anybody have any questions? We're ready to vote.
Move for approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve.
Second.
Mr. Morrison seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The vested rights extension is granted. Thank you, Mr. Helmut. Next item on our agenda, B2, 133 Hester Street, Wagner Terrace, TMS number 463-07-02-032, zoned SR2, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a one-story addition, bedroom expansion baths that extends a non-conforming 5.7-foot north side setback, 9 feet required. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a one-story addition, bedroom expansion bath with a 3-foot rear setback, 25 feet required. The owner is Blake E. Miller. The applicant is B Studio Architecture. Mr. Batchelder.
133 Hester Street is a residence in Wagner Terrace, located just south of Mount Pleasant Street, and has a zoning of SR2. This aerial image shows the existing residence. It's a one-story residence on this lot, and it is, according to the county's information, 1,092 square feet of conditioned floor area. So a small one-story house. And you can see on this block that there are one-story homes and two-story homes, and that's typical of the area of the neighborhood that this home is located in. What the applicant is proposing to do is build an addition off the back of the house, a one-story addition that would keep the house a one-story house, but enlarge the conditioned floor area. So you see on the left the survey of the existing home on the lot. You can see that it encroaches into the west or the north side setback. The dashed line here indicates the required 9-foot setback, and the house is 5.8 feet, 5.7 feet from that north side property line. Here on the right, you see the proposed addition to the existing house, and it basically just extends back using the same north side setback of 5.7 feet. So that's an extension under section 54-110 of a non-conforming building setback. The other aspect of this plan is that it extends well into the required rear 25-foot setback. So this site plan, which I think is very helpful, shows with this dashed line the rear 25-foot building setback. The existing house is well within that building setback, but the addition would extend the house to 3 feet from the rear property line. That shaded area, dark shaded area, is that portion of the addition that requires the variance. And this is a blow up just showing that same image right here. So these are more plans just showing the existing house and the proposed addition, the floor plan for the proposed addition. And the other thing is that they would remove, there's a shed back here in the corner. They would remove that along with making the addition. So moving right along. So these are the existing building elevations. And these are the proposed building elevations. So this area of the city, all the way up to Mount Pleasant Street, falls within the BAR's jurisdiction for demolition. Any buildings 50 years of age or older, if there are elements of the buildings that are demolished, the roof, the windows being removed and replaced, all those exterior features, that requires the approval of the BAR. And this home is more than 50 years of age, so it has to go through that process for any changes on the exterior. And I know that the BAR has objected to, maybe denied changes to these roofs on the one-story buildings to accommodate more height. Not that they've denied all of them, but the applicant in this case has acknowledged in their application that they would have a challenge in trying to do that, to enlarge the house. So they're making an effort, I think, to maintain the character of the existing house by building this addition in the backyard. The other thing I'll point out, and that is that the addition, let's go back to this one. So the addition is 17.5 feet wide back here. And it's more than 3 feet off the north side property line, and it's 3 feet off the rear side property line. So let's say that they proposed a small addition onto the main house and then decided to build a 1-story or even a 1.5-story accessory building in the backyard for additional living space. Well, they could easily do that and satisfy the exception that we have in our zoning ordinance that allows the reduction of the rear and side setbacks to allow the building as close as 3 feet off the north side rear property line. So they can build a building where this addition is being proposed. It's not the same. It's not the addition is not the same as a detached, separate building, but nevertheless, the footprint of this addition could be replaced with a detached accessory building. So I think that's a consideration too when I look at these kinds of requests. So moving along, these are the elevations. These are the perspective drawings that show the proposed addition on the existing house. And these are letters that the applicant has received from neighbors. 150 Sans Souci Street, 52 Clemson Street, both are saying that they do not oppose the request. And then this owner, who happens to be not directly across the street, but right across the street, 130 Hester Street. And so the two closest properties are this 52 Clemson Street right here with the letters of stating that they don't oppose, and 130 Hester Street right here. And the subject property is right here. Now on the county records, the house immediately behind at 56 Clemson Street is not owner occupied according to the county records. It's a rental property. And I believe 58 Clemson Street is not owner occupied either. 135 Hester Street, that is a duplex, and one of the units is owner occupied according to the county records. And so the applicant has indicated to us that they have attempted to, they have left plans, I think, or something with the occupant here to give to the owner of the property. And we don't know if we haven't heard anything from that owner, so we don't know if they're objecting or not. But again, going back to what they're requesting. When I look at these kinds of requests, I think I'm sympathetic to the efforts to try and enlarge these small homes and preserve the character of the homes. So we've supported these kinds of requests in the past. I'm not aware of any objections to this request. And I think it's a reasonable request based on all the things I've gone through. So I recommend approval of the request.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Is there anybody here who wants to speak in opposition to the application of 133 Esther? If you're here in opposition, just raise your hand for us. I know you're here. All right, I see no opposition to the application. Do we have the owner or the applicant here? All right. Anything you'd like to say to the board?
Oh, can I interrupt one
Sure.
thing I forgot to mention? I think the other thing about these is that I think even though the BAR has their jurisdiction over the going up, I would propose that there be a condition on the approval that would restrict the home to be a one-story home in the future. Because I think that's the justification for the large variance on the back. So I
As
don't,
is the removal of the shed, arguably. Is that just incidental?
I think that's incidental to me, but if the board feels differently, that could be.
So I'd like to know how much effort has been made to get the approval of the immediate next door neighbor. You haven't heard from.
I can do that. I've knocked a half a dozen times.
Could you identify yourself?
I'm like, no, I'm
Yeah,
the owner.
thank you, sir.
And I plan to live here as well. So I've knocked several times. I've tracked down the person behind it as well. And I think it was on Charlotte Street, and I put plans in there. I've knocked 3 times, left myself a number. So I live about 7 houses down, so I spend a lot of effort trying to get some.
So the Charlotte Street owner is the 56.
Yes, and it looks to be, okay, it looks like somebody's there, and some of this time was over Thanksgiving. But I made, every time I did my route, it was at least a half a dozen times, and there was never a tenant available for me to track down. Then I went on the tax records and found that she was on Charlotte Street, and went there several times, and, the last time, like, hey, here's the plans, here's a person who knows who's going to be. And that was, so she had time to respond.
Anything you'd like to say about the application? I know you were about to speak before.
Well, it can be relatively brief.
Yeah.
It's just that it is a relatively modest home, and the addition and reconfiguration of the home is not adding bedrooms, just the bathroom space. So it's essentially kind of bringing, a smaller, modest bungalow out to one modern.
And I just have a question for Lee. Am I understanding, so you were saying that the BAR would typically not want the house to go vertical addition, but more horizontal addition would be more preferable?
I think so.
And
It's
that
hard to
should
get us-
be in our, it's kind of an either or. If you're gonna go back, you're not gonna go up.
Right. I think so.
Well, vertical would more likely comply with our requirements as opposed to horizontal.
That's true, but
I would, if he wants to change and BAR wants to bless 2 stories, I don't know that I would restrict him. He'd come back to us.
In either case, you'd be extending the non-conforming setback on the north side. Whether you extend.
Be added.
well, you'd have to
Added
get a
second
variance.
story.
You'd have to get a special exception to go up
For the light,
Two.
and the air,
for the.
light and air considerations.
Yeah. But my condition was if you do the addition to the rear, you don't get to the option of going
Oh,
up.
yours is,
You can't go
not
up.
both. Yes,
Right.
yes, I would agree with that.
And I like that they're maintaining the character of the home and in that area with the 1-story extension.
Any questions for the applicant or the owner? Motion?
I'll move for approval with the condition that, the, request for the home be restricted to 1 story now and in perpetuity. Is that how we should say it?
That's fine. It'll remain as a 1-story, structure will remain as a 1-story home. Do I hear a second on that motion? Got a motion from Ms. Grass, a second from Ms. Richards. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The variance and the special exception are granted with the condition that the structure on the property remain a 1-story home. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is B3, 113 Cooper Street, East Side, TMS number 459-05-03-009, Zone DR2F. Requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a 2-story addition, kitchen expansion, stairs, closet, main room, bedrooms, bathrooms, closets, hallway that extends a non-conforming 0-foot east side setback, 3 feet are required. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a 2-story addition with a 4.25 west side setback, a 2.5-foot rear setback, and a 68% lot occupancy. 50% is the limitation. Existing lot occupancy is 64%, 7 feet and 3 feet are required. The owners are Sheila and Robert Fields. The applicant is Nassim Kashmirian Studio, Inc. Mr. Batchel.
This is a residence in the east side neighborhood on Cooper Street, just east of Meeting Street. This zoning map really shows all the things that are happening in this area. So this house is right next to the former Cooper River Bridge right-of-way as it extended across off of Meeting Street and toward the east. And that area is undergoing redevelopment. There's a new large housing complex right across Cooper Street. And there are future plans for commercial development along Meeting Street here. And then you have this south side of Cooper Street with these historic homes nestled into that corner of the east side. And they're being improved, as you can imagine. But this is an aerial photograph to kind of illustrate the existing conditions. You see the large housing development over here, and then these historic homes right here. Very small lots. The homes typically occupy a significant percentage of the lot. In this case, the current lot occupancy of this building, of this home on the lot, is 64%. So large footprint. That's not uncommon. This is a recently recorded plat to straighten out some of those side property lines, and it shows very small lots with large homes on them, just like I indicated. In this case, this homeowner would like to build a 2-story addition on the back of the property. The height is allowed by the zoning ordinance, so we're dealing with setback issues and lot occupancy as well. This cover sheet to the plan shows what they would like to do, not what currently exists. So there's a history of how the homes have changed over time, and that's reflected in these old Sanborn maps. These are photographs of the existing home. The existing home, according to the county information, is 838 square feet of conditioned floor area, so a very small home. one story. And then again, another view of that area of the city and all the things that are happening in that area. And then the proposed plan. So on the left is what they're proposing to do. On the right is the existing house. So this footprint shown on the right is the existing one-story house. And then on the left, you can see that it is growing a little bit. It goes a little bit further back on the lot. So that's over here on this east side property, east side line of the lot. They're proposing to extend that non-conforming east side setback, which is basically the house is right up on the property line. Back, they're proposing to extend back to within 2.5 feet of the rear property line. The requirement under the zoning ordinance is 3 feet, so that's a variance. And then they're proposing to encroach into the west side setback. The house becomes a little bit wider with this additional encroachment into that west side setback. And that requires a variance to have a 4.25 foot west side setback. And that's 4.25 feet at this closest corner right here. And then the lot occupancy of the building increases from 64% to 68%. And this is blow up of that site plan. The building setback is represented by this line right here. That's the required building setback. Well, that's not quite right, actually. It's 3 feet on this side and 7 feet on this side. So it's reversed a little bit, but anyway. And then floor plans showing existing and proposed elevations. So on the right is the existing house, and on the left is the proposed house. Now this also falls into the same BAR district where they have to review demolition of existing portions of houses that exceed 50 years of age, which this does. So this will also require their approval. Side elevation here. Other side.
What direction is that side elevation from?
This would be the west side elevation.
So Meeting Street's on the left.
So this would be the view looking from Meeting Street.
I'm sorry, yeah, Cooper Street, yeah.
And this would be the east side elevation here, so against the neighbor. And then indications here from nearby property owners indicating indicating their support for this request. So we've got 114 Cooper Street. I believe Karen Williams resides on Line Street, immediately to the back of this property, I believe, although there's no address. And 32 Line Street, 70 America Street, 103 Cooper Street. And so these are the property owners I know, the addresses of the property owners who have signed. 103 Cooper, there's one resident of 114 Cooper, and then 32 Line, I think, and this is the subject property right here, 113, and I think 34 Shepherd Street, 34 Shepherd Street maybe is the other supporter of this, although I'm not positive about that. So those are the, that's the situation, that's the request. we have supported some of these requests in the past in this area. You can see some of these homes are quite large on these small lots. They're very small lots. And so there's not much room to do things with these homes unless you seek variances or special exceptions. And I think we've recognized that in our previous requests, previous support. And also the fact that this is in this corner of the neighborhood where there's a abrupt transition from these small single family homes to larger commercial or higher density residential developments. So I think there's a changing character of the neighborhood right here, and I think they're still maintaining the house, the historic home, and we'll see what the VAR does. But I'm supportive of this request. I think they satisfy the variance requirements for the variances they're requesting and the special exception requirements. And again, I'm not aware of any objections or concerns. The applicant could probably speak to their what they've done with contacting neighboring property owners, that sort of thing. But I'm supportive of this request.
Thank you, Lee. Do we have anybody here intending to speak in opposition to the application for 113 Cooper Street? Just give me one moment, please, and let's make sure we hear from the owner and or applicant. Owner applicant here.
Representative of.
Okay. Would you please identify yourself for the record, please?
My name is Rick Rockwell.
Okay. Mr. Rockwell, please tell us about the application.
Well, the family is been in this neighborhood for 3 generations on this street corner, so on 3 of the homes. So the history with this corner is known by them better than most. And Mr. Fields, the house has gone into some disrepair over the years, and there are very small door openings, floors roll dramatically, some of the most dramatic floor conditions I've seen, and Freeman's cottage has still lived in. He is a disabled veteran and needs multiple chairs to get from one end of the house to the other because he can't get through doorways or down hallways. The second floor would be for the family. It is a very close family. They have children that still live in the home with them or grown. The second floor would be dedicated to their space. First floor is mainly for Mr. Fields to be able to get around from one end of the house to the other. Really, this is the same project that I did with Nassim on Strawberry Lane on a much tighter street, a very tight lot, and Mrs. Fields loved that design. That's how she found me. Was looking at that house, and she came and asked if we could look at hers and perhaps do the same project. Any from that project to this are all about 8 years for Mr. Fields. Those dimensions are derived from somebody that's in a wheelchair that has access to all parts of the home, which he currently does not have. They are legacy owners, and I feel that I've done this project for a lot of other members of our community that don't have the same history as Fields family does with this home, with their home. And so I was very happy to have an opportunity to work with a family like this and work on a design that meets their modern needs as their family has aged, as the family has grown, and that we're already at a 64% occupancy of the property as it is now. We're not compliant on setbacks now. What we have is a home that's not livable, I think, and this improvement would for this family where they're at. So this is a project of a lot of close conversations about how to improve the home and give them opportunities to meet their needs. There's a lot of growing that's happening on this street. We did 76 Cooper, same architect, Nancy, and us, built that house on, so that, you know, it's very modern, contemporary. There was nothing there before. But there's another, the apartment complex that was completed last year. There's another one just like it, directly behind it, also on Cooper Street. It's going up right now. The density in the neighborhood is changing. And Mrs. Fields and her family would like to stay on that corner as they have been for 3 generations. And we'd like to help them do it.
Mr. Rockwell, could you address conversations or outreach to neighbors?
We talked to everybody on the street who wasn't a family member, and everybody that we've spoken to has been supportive. And I'm not shy from talking to anybody. If you're asking, we've knocked on every door across the street. It's a bunch of 20, 30-something-year-olds. They take care of that sort of thing. But everybody else that's on the street, that's old Charleston, that has been there. They know the Fields family for a long time. They're very supportive.
Anybody have any questions?
And the house immediately next door, did you say that was theirs also?
Theirs as well, yes, ma'am. Mrs. Fields' mother, who's in her 90s, is in that one. We're talking about that one. Next.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Rockwell. Unless anybody else has any questions, we'll hear from anybody else who's in support of the application. Is there anybody else who's in support? Seeing none, we'll hear from anyone in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Passion Burley with Historic Charleston Foundation. We do oppose the setback and lot occupancy variances to allow for this 2-story addition because we do not find that the application meets each of the 4 criteria of the variance test. Those are required in section 54-924 of the city zoning ordinance and section 800 of chapter 29, title 6 of the state code. While we do sympathize with the applicant regarding accessibility and desire to remain in their generational home, there are other specific ways to make it accessible. With regard to the 4-part variance test, with regard to criterion A, we don't find that there are extraordinary or exceptional conditions pertaining to this particular piece of property. The lot at 113 Cooper Street is regularly shaped, similar in size and shape to surrounding lots of Cooper, Nassau, Hanover, and Shepherd Streets. The building form is also a common vernacular building for Charleston. With regard to criterion B, the same lot and building design conditions generally do apply to other properties in the vicinity. As 113 Cooper is a standard historic freedman's cottage that does not have extraordinary or exceptional conditions. And the conditions of inaccessibility are the same for the more than 350 freedman's cottages that HCF has surveyed on the peninsula. And the freedman's cottage is most commonly found in the east side neighborhood. The neighboring property directly to the north at 111 Cooper is nearly identical to 113 in lot and building form. And this same building design applies to 8 other cottages on Cooper Street, 15 on Nassau, 12 on Shepherd, and 6 on Hanover Street. With regard to criterion C, since the conditions of the first and second criteria don't apply, don't find that they would effectively prohibit unreasonably the utilization of this property. And lastly, with criterion D, we do find that the variance would be of substantial detriment to the character of the district. Authorization of the variance would allow for an inappropriately large and incongruous addition. thus harming the character and historic integrity of Charleston's east side. Because the application doesn't meet all 4 criteria of the variance test, and because the Board of Zoning Appeals is only authorized to approve a variance when all 4 criteria are met, we would respectfully encourage the board to deny the application and ask the applicant to restudy and reformulate their proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Elect. Does anybody have any questions for Historic Charleston? Somebody here.
I kind of have a question. Has there been conversation between HCF and the owner about alternatives yet?
Well, let's go ahead and hear a rebuttal. We do give you an opportunity for rebuttal.
I believe Nassim spoke with Lee at great length about the criteria and opinion. Ma'am?
Excuse me, Mr. Rockwell, Nassim spoke with me. Yes, sir. Well, we exchanged emails.
Great.
Yes, sir.
Communication through whatever medium was happening, and those conversations with regard to the program. So I've not spoken with the Charleston Foundation. I've done this project. I've worked on many freedmen's cottages. The way that I will do this project with a 2-story addition will be done in such a way that the freedmen's cottage will be intact as is. All of the floor joists will have to be replaced. But beyond that, the 2-story addition is detachable from the freedmen's cottage. In some world, we wanted to do that. The house as it is does not meet the needs for the family that's been in it for 3 generations. So what we're looking at doing with this house architecturally and changing it is what we're able to do with the lot as it is. It's a very challenging project. It's very easy to sit back and be armchair quarterback. I do these projects, we work through the issues. If there are dimensions or architectural subtle changes that we can make, we are open to those kinds of things. This is a good project and one that I've done many times. So I'll defer to Nassim's responses. We've done studies on that street and in that neighborhood to have comparisons for other projects that reflect very similar situations. These homes need to be adapted for the origin. The house is falling into further disrepair every week and month. That happens. What I'll do to it will restore the original Freedman's Cottage and add on to the back of it. If somebody wanted to remove that addition in the future, they can. There's a structural way for me to do this, but the Freedman's Cottage and all of these projects becomes a part of the common space. It's an open floor plan. We're not doing 3 bedrooms. Excuse me, a bathroom and a half in a Freedman's Cottage. 8 months red, but Freedman's Cottage is not happening. It's not enough room. 2-story addition keeps the family in it. The deals on the first, that's the family. The kids on the second.
Thank you, Mr. Rockwell. Any further questions from Mr. Rockwell? I have a question for Lee. If this board were to approve the special exception and the variance, does it still have to go before the BAR? Do they have to have another approval based upon the architecture? Or is this?
Well, we do have an email from Azim Mishmirian who indicates that another person, she states in here that I know there were some concerns regarding BAR approval and the growth in lot coverage. However, I wanted to let you know we received BAR demolition approval and would like to get on the roster for the December 6th meeting. Prior to the meeting, I was hopeful to find some time to further discuss and collaborate. So it appears that they have the BAR approval that they need to move forward with the project if the board approves this, although I can't speak to that absolutely. I'm not absolutely positive of that. But it appears from this email, it's dated November 3rd, that a BAR approval has been granted.
Slide 39. Slide 39 says at the bottom.
Where is it? Is that slide, is it?
39.
The application.
Oh, the application?
No, sorry.
For the BAR.
BAR review.
Oh, did I skip that slide?
Unless I've got a different version.
After the photos, I think.
It's after
After and after the photos.
this. Oh, this,
There we go.
right. That's right. So this says final approval for demolition of rear addition as shown on drawings less than 50 years of age. So that's the demolition approval. I'm not sure, I can't say for sure that there's not some additional approval from the board that's necessary for this project. I believe this is demolition approval for, I believe, and Mr. Rockwell maybe could, just wait a minute here, let me go back. There's some portion of the rear part of the building, it might be this area back here, that maybe was going to be demolished, but I'm not sure. I can't speak to that. And that may be what that approval is for. So,
Mr. Rockwell, are you able to speak on the demolition permit?
Yes, the additions on the rear are very modern and in very poor condition. So as is often the case, the additions on the houses are worse than the original house. And those usually get granted to be demolished because of the conditions on it and they're much newer.
Do you know whether or not there will be any further need for approval by the BAR for architectural approval or design?
I do not believe BAR will be, weighing in on the design at this point, because the Freedman's Cottage portion is what we discussed, and we will return all those details, as I always do, to the original condition. Freedman's Cottage, the addition essentially is bolted onto the back, but the Freedman's Cottage architectural details, which are very familiar with, will go back as we were at this point.
Could you perhaps speak to the objections or concerns that have been lodged by Historic Charleston and in terms of the test for the variance? And I think she's gone through the 4 elements and disputes that one is met, but what, in your opinion, what are the extraordinary conditions that apply to the
I am a builder. And I'm not going to be able to speak to that. The discussions that happened between Penny and Nancy, in my opinion, were I'm not going to going counterpoint to HCF about this. I do these projects all the time, and I'm comfortable and familiar with how this process goes. This is one of the tightest lots I've been on. But Strawberry Lane maybe have been tighter than almost the exact same project, much tighter street. But if what I've said hasn't answered the questions, then I'll let the chips fall in the match.
I'm wondering if Mr. Batchelder might be able to address some of the concerns Historic Charleston Foundation has about meeting the variance test.
Well, I understand the needs of the homeowners here, and I'm sympathetic to that, and I'm so sensitive to the fact that relative to the other areas of the neighborhood, these are very tiny lots, and so I think there's a pattern of development in this particular street where we've got some two-story homes and some one-story homes, and on these very small lots, they occupy a substantial portion of the lot. So the lot occupancy really isn't changing much. There's a slight increase, and so then we're left with the special exception on the east side, variance on the rear property line and the west side. And the west side of this property, as you can see, is a commercially zoned property over here. That's the case. Let me just back up. Well, okay, so there is a vacant lot here, and I don't know who owns that property. And then on the other side of that is commercially zoned property. So feel that there will be adverse impacts granting these approvals to any adjacent property owners. And I'm wondering if 115 Cooper Street is maybe also owned by the Fields. The applicant can speak to that. But
So the city's in favor of granting exception in the variance?
Correct.
Does the city have any spoken or unspoken policy about preservation of freedmen's cottages and modern additions or otherwise to freedmen's cottages?
The city may have that in the BAR's policies. But
in all events, this neighborhood is in transition anyway. With that apartment building across the street.
yeah, the immediate corner of the east side neighborhood, certainly.
Do we have the, I'm a little bit concerned about the application submitted to BAR, just based on the language that's written. It's addressing only the addition, doesn't speak to the roof or any of the construction on the west side, which we clearly have to go off in order to add a second story. Just doesn't seem like that application for demolition addresses the full extent of demolition is required to do this work. And I don't see those. I don't know if this is the same struggle. Are these the same drawings submitted to BAR that are before us, or are these different?
Don't most applicants usually come before us and they go to BAR? No.
Usually that's the way it happens. Unfortunately, I'd like to do it. But so depending on what the board thinks, one option is deferral, and we can try and answer the questions that you have before the next meeting.
I feel like all the questions I had were answered adequately. I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks.
I'm frankly concerned about the point HCF makes. We are bound by law to check all the full criteria for variances, and they're all collective. They all have to be met. And sometimes, in my opinion, we skim through that without going through all. Oftentimes, most of the time. But they've raised each of these issues, and this, I would just like to get the answer to the question that's been asked a couple of times, and maybe the architect can come, but I would like to know, since we have opposition, that we are voting in compliance with the law on a variance and all its criteria. And I'm uncomfortable about that right
I think I tend to agree. I'd like to see I'd like to see the full criteria addressed by the applicant directly. In a formal response, perhaps, part of their application.
Lee, what is our policy, what is the city's policy with respect to supplementing an application while it's deferred? Are there
We allow
supplemental
that.
materials that can be received
Yes.
by the city while an application is pending and under a deferral?
Yes, we've allowed that.
So if, for example, we were to receive supplemental information from the applicant that addressed each and every point for the variance criteria, and receive that perhaps from an attorney, we might be able to consider that after the deferral. Is that right?
Correct.
It's part of the application.
So on that basis, I would move for deferral to allow the applicant to supplement their application to address the four specific criteria in the variance.
All right, Mr. Bennett has moved to defer the application. Is there a second? Second. All right, Mr. Morrison has seconded the motion to defer.
I have one, sorry, I have one.
Go ahead.
Friendly, and that they verify if they're in or outside of BAR. I'm looking at the map right now, it's right on the hash.
Lee, can we get confirmation as to whether or not this property is within the jurisdiction of the BAR?
Sure. Thank you. It's right on the hash for demo versus required. It does look like they're just in demo though, but confirm that. Thank you, I apologize.
Sure. We have a motion pending by Mr. Bennett, seconded by Mr. Morrison. The motion is to defer the application. All in favor? Is there any further discussion? Anybody needs to discuss this further?
Just as a matter of information, that block is an eclectic mix of styles and types. And because we got so much commercial all around it, there's no excuse. However, I can see the applicant coming forward to say they want to do it. But I just wanted to make that comment as a matter of context.
And just so it's clear as well, the vote on the motion to defer, if the motion to defer is granted and they'll be able to have an opportunity to come back with supplemental materials. If it's denied, I believe we'll have to decide the matter now based upon the information that we have. So the motion to defer is on the table, it's pending, it's been seconded, and it's right for a vote. All in favor of the motion to defer, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The matter has been deferred, not denied, so we'll hope to receive some supplemental materials from the owner or applicant that will better define some of the criteria that are required by our zoning ordinance. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda. Mr. Goodwin is recused from this item. This is 114 Spring Street, Canonboro, Elliotboro. PMS number 460-11-02-010, zoned LB, requesting a special exception under section 54-511 to allow 389 square feet of outdoor patron use area, second floor deck, for restaurant use without providing required parking spaces. 3 spaces are required. The owner is 114 Spring Partners LLC. The applicant is JJR Development LLC. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a property in Cannonboro, Elliotboro. It's a commercial, actually mixed-use property with residential and commercial space. It sits on the northwest corner of Spring and Rutledge Avenue. It's very prominent, and you'll recognize the building when you see it. The building has recently been renovated, and what was a hip roof over the one-story commercial section of the building is now a flat roof with a deck that was constructed on top, and the ground floor space of the building will be occupied by a restaurant. They would like to utilize this deck on the roof of that one-story section of the building for additional patron use area, and that's what is before you tonight. Everything else with this plan had been grandfathered based on prior uses within this building, the number of residential units, the commercial space on the ground floor. So it's just the rooftop deck, the small rooftop deck, that needs more approval for that additional patron area for the restaurant. So moving along, they removed spaces within, commercial spaces really within the ground floor of this building when they renovated this building, and that those spaces are shown here. Also, they opened up the piazzas on the upper floor of the multi-story section of the building, and that's what these drawings reflect. So moving along, this is the, I guess that's the elevation. Yeah, this is the rooftop area right here in elevation over that one-story section of the building. Now for the photographs. So these photographs show the building before and after. So here's the before photograph of this building. And you notice that there was this one-story storefront addition that was added to the historic structure. And then these enclosed piazzas on the upper floors of this building. And the building obviously was in great need of a lot of tender loving care. This corner building, which is an interesting feature of this property. This is the after shot. So that one-story storefront was removed. The piazzas were opened up, and the building has been beautifully restored. And then this one-story section has been redesigned with a flat roof instead of a hip roof, and the deck is situated right here. Before, after, and then this is the view from Spring Street, the before view. And there was a restaurant down here before, through the years, as well as some sort of retail space here. So it's had a variety of uses over the years, and so the restaurant use that they're proposing is not a new one for this location. And then this is a view of that rooftop area, a part of the rooftop area. So back to this, 389 square feet, 3 parking spaces. And there might be maybe it's the same square footage overall for commercial space on this property, but because it's outdoor space and not indoor space, I felt it had to come before the board and be approved. And so the neighborhood association in this letter that they sent us indicates that Marion Hawkins' request, and he's president of the Cannonboro neighborhood. I'm writing to confirm that the neighborhood association supports this special exception at 114 Spring. Although the association has not voted upon this application specifically, we supported the renovation of the structure with the full understanding that it was meant to include a restaurant and that no parking could be provided. Therefore, our support for this project extends to its current application, and we're not aware of any opposition among our membership. So they support this proposal, and obviously the improvements to that building are really a tremendous job, tremendous improvement for the neighborhood. And so I recommend approval of this request, but with the condition that, and this goes back to my broken record. I'm always concerned about noise, so I recommend approval with 2 conditions: no live music on the rooftop and no amplified sound, louder than normal conversational tones on the rooftop. And the applicant, when he contacted me about this, I said I would probably be in support, assuming the neighborhood would be in support, and would recommend these conditions. And he didn't indicate a problem with those conditions. So, and he's here tonight.
All right, thank you, Lee. Is there anybody who's here in opposition to the application for 114 Spring Street? All right, no one is here in opposition. Do we have the owner or applicant? Mr. Roberts,
We
yes.
have both the owner and the applicant, Jeff Roberts for the development team, Travis Arnett for the ownership. We appreciate the time and consideration. This is a wonderful project, harkening back to how Mia Riley sort of trained me as a novice in this. When you save the corner, you save the entire block. And the work that we did on the development and design team with Eddie Bello and what Travis was able to execute from a construction point of view, we think just tremendously increases the streetscape. And furthermore, if we didn't do any of the renovation and put the restaurant in, I think we'd be grandfathered in. And we actually reduced, even including the deck, the commercial elements by about 90 square feet. So respectfully, any questions, just let me know if you have any.
Okay. I did have one question. We're here tonight post construction. Do you already have your CO, or is this in progress? Or
the CO for the upstairs is in play. The upstairs is residential component, and this is awaiting the outfit for the Italian restaurant that's going in. So we need the special exception to commence the construction work for the tenant upfit.
Okay, I see. So this is part of the plan for the restaurant tenant.
The use is bifurcated mixed use, residential C of O's upstairs, and the downstairs is awaiting the tenant upfit, and on the granting of the special exception, Mr. Arnett can commence the construction on the front.
And this is a second floor deck that you'd like to.
It's a small deck of which there's an internal stairway, fire code exit that Mr. Bella put into it on the rear of it that we demolished some unsightly additions. So it's a small little deck area that doesn't carry that many people. And although I gave a very novel argument to Lee about that we reduce the overall commercial square footage, I deferred to the guru of all zoning, and we needed a special exception, not a variance for the 3 parts.
Okay, and it was not part of the original plan because it wasn't part of what the because it came in with the new restaurant tenant, or what? Why is it's being added on later?
Well, these were additions that were put on as sort of a Franken addition that were put on in mid-century, and it looked hideous. Okay. So we brought it back to period looking and really took away some commercial spaces, restored the piazzas, took away some square footage, and this really adds, especially to the corner. That little rooftop deck is like a stairway going up from the inside of it, and it really adds to the commercial vitality and really fits the comprehensive plan, especially in Canterbury, Elliottboro, and revitalizes and interacts with this neighborhood quite well.
Okay, and go ahead, Lee.
I might
just
just
add I
just want to add one point
Associate.
of clarification. I should add or share all this. That roof deck was fully approved by BAR with the stair up to it. What was missing was the special exception for seating. So when
that your goal reference in the neighborhood had reviewed it with the BAR that approval. They are fully aware of the deck and the restaurant.
Okay.
And the renovations.
And it's just a variance relating to the parking available on site, is that right, Lee?
That's correct.
Yes, a special exception.
Special exception, thank you.
Yeah.
Would you consent to the conditions that Lee has suggested relating to no live music and no amplified music louder than normal conversational tones?
Yes.
Anybody else have any questions for the owner or the applicant?
Question for Lee. At the conditions you suggested are consistent with what we've done in the past. Just commenting on that. I am curious though, what the hours of operation are.
This is limited business, so they'll be restricted to operating between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. I don't know what they plan to do, but that would be the limits.
Thank you.
Make that motion.
All right, Mr. McKay has moved to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Grass has seconded the motion to approve. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The special exception is granted. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Under the conditions. Under the condition that there'll be no live music and no amplified music louder than normal conversation. Okay, thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda, because we've got a deferral of B5, we're now on B6, 78 Haygood Avenue, Hampton Park Terrace, TMS number 460-02-04-146, zoned DR-1F, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a horizontal expansion, stairs, master bedroom, closets, bathroom, laundry, mudroom, and vertical extension, bedrooms, closets, bathrooms, that extends a non-conforming 14-foot, 3.5-inch total side setback, 15 feet are required. The owner is Sheila Harvey. Applicant is Joel Adrian, Coastal Creek Design. Mr. Batchelder.
The application concerns a residence in Hampton Park Terrace on Haygood Avenue between Congress and Hugie. And you might remember back in September, we had an application for this property come through the board for this rear addition. That was granted by the board, but they're back before the board and they can explain the reasons, I think, better than I can. So anyway, here's the view of the property. It's a one-story residence. And this shows the existing house on the property. And this shows the plan that was approved back in September. And note that the distance between the back of the addition and the rear property line was 32 feet, 10.5 inches. Now the plans have been revised so that they basically want to go back another 7 feet to decrease the rear setback to 25 feet, 5 inches. And they can explain the reason for that. But so it's a 7-foot extension further back. The house addition has actually been narrowed slightly from what it was before. The extent of the encroachment, total extent of the encroachment, adds up to, I think, about 8 inches. So it's a very slight encroachment into the total side setback the total side setback that's required for the property. And so there was a variance before for the stair to be added on the side over here. That was granted. It doesn't need to be reapproved. So it's only the additional depth of this addition that requires your approval for a special exception to extend those non-conforming setbacks. And these floor plans show what they're proposing to do. And it's a two-story addition on the back of this one-story house. I think the previous plan was denied by the BAR, so that's why they're back and forth with this redesign. So we recommend approval. At the previous meeting, the applicant had obtained support from some of the neighbors, and we know that they had contacted all the neighbors around the property. That's correct. So we supported it then. We still support this request.
Thank you, Lee. Do we have anybody here in opposition to the application for 78 Haygood Avenue?
Not in opposition, but I need some clarification.
So just, we'll hear from you in a few moments. Do we have the owner applicant here?
Joel Adrian, I'm the applicant.
Yes, sir. Please come on up. Tell us what we need to know.
Well, thank you for your time this evening. I'll just make one quick little correction with what Lee said. We did not submit to BAR for the previous application. We did the drawings. We sat down with city staff, and city staff made it relatively clear that they would not be supportive of the application for BAR. The difference between the two designs was the previous one that you all looked at and approved addition, the second story addition, significantly stacked on top of the existing historic structure. And so then what we've looked at was, well, we could legally use more of the rear yard if we get the slight variance or a special exception for the total side yard setback, which is 15 feet that's required. And also by doing that, we would significantly change and maintain just the character of the existing structure that's there. So that is the purpose for why the addition steps in. And so as you're walking down the street or looking at this property, the existing roof line that extends from the front porch all the way to the rear of the property is maintained and stays intact straight to that corner board. All the window locations, window sizes are maintained, stay intact. And it turns that corner on the rear. We stepped in about 6 to 7 inches on each side. And then we're creating this two-story addition that we want to put on the house to accommodate some living space. I don't know that there's anything else. I'm glad to answer any questions if I should do that now.
We'll hear from her if she'd like to speak. But does anybody have any questions?
Have the neighbors been consulted about the extension?
So we did not receive any opposition at the time for the extension at the rear.
But at the time, it wasn't quite as far back as this is. This is 7 more feet.
7 more feet, but it steps in, so it's not sitting right at the existing corner of that house. And so we're talking about a total of 8.5 inches, and I'll just put it in this respect, in the fisherman's world, 8.5 inches is a lot. And so when you look at the design, the reason that we haven't said, oh, let's just take 8.5 more inches out of the structure, we don't need to come here, is that then those second floor spaces become so small that they're relatively unusable.
Any other questions for the applicant while he's standing here? All right, we may have questions for you again. You'll also have an opportunity to rebut, but we'll hear from the woman here in opposition. If you'll please let us know your name, your address, please.
My name is Marie Foreman, and I live on 80 Haygood Avenue.
Thank you.
I just wanted to know how, because I didn't come in September because I was out of town, but I spoke with Joelle over the phone. And I wanted to know, with the extension, horizontal extension, how would that affect the light to my house?
So I don't know how to quantify exactly. Certainly a two-story extension addition in the backyard if you wanted to impact sun at some point. But it's in the degree of it, I don't know.
The extension is in the back?
Is off the back of the house only. So looking at this plan here, this you can this is our existing house right here. So then this part that has the hatch in it is our addition. So we were approved initially to take this part and push it straight back, come across, and connect. Redesign says, well, let's step it in a little bit further because we're not able to come on top of the existing structure. So there would have been a two-story home this size on the property even with prior approval. It just would have been shifted towards the front of the lot further.
So this is now towards the back? The extension?
The extension is to the back of the front.
To the back of the front, yes. Now, I want to know when they dig up stuff, would that affect the water? Would that affect my property?
They're digging things out, whether or not those are construction practices,
Yes.
this board doesn't really have any jurisdiction or authority over. Mr. Batchelder, can you show us, you said you're at 80? We see 80.
Well, you're to the north on Haygood Avenue, next door.
Yes.
On the left side, if you're standing on Haygood looking at the house, you're to the left.
Yeah, to the right, actually, if you're looking at the house, to the, my house, their house is to the right of me.
Right.
Yes.
And you're to the left
Yes.
of their house.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Can you flip to 91?
Dear Mrs. Foreman?
Foreman, yes, very Foreman.
I don't know the slide numbers.
Oh, you don't have slide numbers on your?
I just have it told
Second one in
screens.
this application.
Second one?
3D aerial.
There you go.
That one. So this is Mrs. Foreman's house right here.
So our addition obviously is pushing further back behind her existing structure.
Well, the sun comes up to answer Ms. Foreman's question. The sun comes up on this side of all of that. Not on the south side where he is. Although it continues to get over that part of the sky later in the day. No, I got it backwards. That's
So it
east.
stayed on the south side from the.
Now that you know where, Ms. Foreman, now that you know where the addition is to be built, does that help comfort you, or do you still have concerns?
No, it helps.
I just need a clarification about the 7 feet versus the 8-inch encroachment. I'm so confused about that.
Well, the total side setback requirement is 15 feet. So one side has to be at least 3 feet, the other side has to be at least 9, and one or both of those side setbacks has to be increased to total 15.
Right.
They're at 14 feet, 3.5 inches of width of total side setback. So they're roughly 8 inches short of meeting that total 15-foot setback. Now,
And that's all we're trying to address right now.
right, and the setback off the north side property line is actually 4 feet 11 inches to this addition versus the 3 foot that's required.
Right.
And then the south side setback is 9 feet 4.5 inches. So both side setbacks meet the minimum requirements, but the total of those two setbacks doesn't quite equal the 15. That's why we're here.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, anybody else have any questions for the applicant, questions for Mrs. Foreman? Any
And you said that you're initially approved, and you're basically readjusting it by 4 feet, is that what you're saying?
So the initial approval, we are extending it, I think we had mentioned it was 7 feet further back, stepped in from what the original approval was. The two-story element initially came over the house, past the existing chimney. So now we've taken the part that came forward, we said, let's rework program. We can push it back, still meet the rear 25-foot setback. We just need a little help on the side yard total.
Right, so the 7 feet, it's fine. Yes. That's
Yes,
fine.
no encroachment.
Right, exactly. Okay,
Just the total
right,
amount of the side setback doesn't equal the
okay.
city zoning ordinance. Correct?
Yeah,
Correct.
I'll just mention I'm perfectly happy to consult with the city on mathematics. That 9 plus 3 is 12, not 15. On the total 7.
All right. Do we have anybody else who's here in support? I neglected to ask that. Anybody here in support of this application? Just waiting on the wings to talk about it. Yes.
Chairman Ellis Leesman here on behalf of the Hardys. And I also came before the board at the September 20th meeting when the similar approval was unanimously approved. And we just quickly speak to Board Member Morris's point about the sun, rising in the east and setting in the west. And Lee, if you might show that aerial that you had, and appreciate Ms. Foreman being here and for her comments. You can see that this is Baston Hall here, which is a 44,000 square foot citadel building where the Tom and Victoria Baker School of Business is located. On this corner, there's a 107,000 square foot structure called Capers Hall that's being added to the Citadel campus. Johnson Haygood Stadium here, 11,427 seats and Holiday. So it's a mixed use area, and this is a type of approval again that this board has granted for 546 UG, 451 UG, 471 UG, and so it's similar in that, similar to what was before. Again, the board and Joel gave a good explanation of those differences. So we just again would ask for your support of this application. I've known the Harveys personally for about 15 years, and we talked about living space. They're a Brady Bunch family. They have 6 kids between them and 6 grandkids between them, counting. And this is to help accommodate that that family as visiting and helping them to make this into a home that is fitting of their family. So again, thank you for the time before the board, and Lee, thank you for your assistance and support to the Harveys and Ms. Ashby as well. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Leesman. All right, anybody else have any further questions or discussion? Are we ready for a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. McKay moves to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Morrison seconds the motion to approve. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The special exception for 78 Haygood Avenue is approved. Thank you very much, Harveys. Thank you very much for coming, Ms. Foreman. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
I said that. I know, you said it right, but we gotta change that.
All right, the final item on our agenda is B7, 1819 Bentgrass Court. Grimble Shores, TMS number 334-03-00-022, zone RR1, requesting a variance from section 54-347.1 to allow construction of a single-family residence that encroaches into the required 10-foot building setback from the critical line buffer. The owner is Jesse Sandoli. The applicant is Dan Sweeney. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a residentially zoned lot on James Island along the Stono River. And we've subdivided along with these neighboring lots when it was under the jurisdiction of Charleston County. And then it was annexed into the city. Some of the lots have been annexed into the city. And this is one of them. And so we have a application for a new home to be constructed on this lot, and request for variance to allow an encroachment of the building of the proposed home into the 10-foot setback from the critical line buffer for the lot. So here's an aerial view. So you see the river, you see the marsh. So there's a critical line that runs over on this side of the property, and pursuant to the requirements of the city zoning ordinance, there's a 25-foot critical line buffer in which no structures can be built other than fences and docks, of course, water-dependent structures. But and the intent of that is to preserve the natural environment that exists along that critical line to help mitigate the impacts of stormwater runoff into the Stono River. And then beyond that 25-foot critical line buffer is a 10-foot building setback that's meant to help protect the buffer area. And so the applicant has come up with a design for a home on this lot. But the other thing about it is, and I'll just point out here, you can see all the trees on this lot. Many of those trees are not grand trees, but there are grand trees, really grand, beautiful live oaks on the lot. And that impacts the ability to build a home on this property. And then, of course, the shape of the lot is unusual as well. So information that was submitted with the application. And see homes on the neighboring lots that have been constructed. Here you see the property line, the outer dashed line, and then that critical line buffer extends along the marsh here. And then there's this 10-foot building setback from that critical line buffer right here. And then these represent the setbacks, required building setbacks from the other side and front property lines. A survey of the property shows all the trees that are on the property, including a large live oak right here, which is actually, I think, 42 inches in diameter. 37 is indicated here, and a 35-inch live oak here, which is actually 38 inches in diameter, according to the records that we have. So those two trees are located well inside this buildable area that's defined by these dashed lines that run around the property. Again, setback lines from the side property line, the front property line, and the other side property line. And then you have this 10-foot building setback from the critical line buffer. This view shows the tree protection zone around these trees that is required by city zoning ordinance. So again, shrinking that buildable area and impacting the ability to build a home on the lot. Then you also see these lines here. The applicants have done a careful job of surveying the crown of the trees. And in addition, they have done a three-dimensional survey of the site that shows the limbs of these trees and how they can, to aid them in trying to design a home to work around those features. And the other thing about this, of course, is it's on the Stono River. It's in a flood zone. You have to elevate the first floor substantially because of flood zone requirements. So lots of impacts that begin to really restrict how you can build on the lot. This was one proposal that they looked at. This proposal includes these three building elements, including the main one that would require a zoning variance for the removal of this 42-inch live oak at this location. So that's an option, but not one that we would encourage. And these trees, by the way, I think are, and the applicant can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're all in very good health. So they've been studied by an arborist and in good health. this is the proposal that they would like to put forward. So obviously a very custom designed home to fit on this lot and work around these trees. So you see the two building footprints. These are the buildings that will go down and require a foundation in that location all the way to the ground. Then you see here, these are the sections of the 10-foot building setback where the building will encroach. There's a pool here, and that is a part of the building because it's elevated. And then this other building over here. Again, those two buildings are outside the protective zones around the grand trees. And then between those two buildings is an elevated area of the building that will be designed so it doesn't impact the root zone of the grand tree here. Just moving on. So you see, so what's crosshatched here with this corner and this part down here, and then moving along down here, all the way down here. Those are the areas of the proposed house that require your approval for an encroachment, variance for an encroachment into that critical line.
Mr. Batchelder, I apologize for the interruption. Mr. Tibbles, I must excuse myself for I got to deal with a medical issue, so I will have to step out.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Moving on, so this is a three-dimensional survey that was done of the trees on this site, and so that they could come up with a home design for this home that would work around these trees and protect them and not require significant impacts to these trees. So that is part of their proposal. And I've never seen one of these before, but so it's very interesting and shows the lengths that they're going to try and protect these trees in the site. So there we are with the building footprints. And this is a letter from the neighbor to the north, immediate neighbor on the north side of this lot, indicating that they support this request for the variance. And so that's includes all the slides. So our person on our staff who works with tree protection regulations has been out to the site, seen the plan for this home that was staked on the site and studied it. And we feel that this is a very worthy effort to work around these trees and protect them and fit a home on the site that works with the site and these constraints. And so we are supportive of this request and recommend approval of it to the board based on the the constraints on the site with grand trees, the shape of the property, and the extensive setbacks that are shown here that really restrict the location where you can build a home on this lot. We would much prefer this variance request to a variance request to remove one of these grand trees.
So OCRM doesn't have any say in this buffer issue.
No, the buffer is a city zoning regulation.
Do you have any thoughts about what negative impacts would occur with building into that 10-foot area? The way it's proposed, the design?
Well, it's a building setback zone, and it's meant to maintain a space around the house so that you're not impacting the critical line buffer. I think in this case, the way this home is designed, it doesn't have a yard. You know, the yard is on the deck, and you know the applicants can speak to this more than I can. The design and what they're trying to achieve. So I don't see this design being one that would create those kind of impacts. Fine.
All right, so I don't see that there's anybody in opposition. I know we have the owner and the applicant here. Is there anything you'd like to tell the board or address?
I would speak to your point, Dan Sweeney, applicant.
Thank you.
Meeting Eric out there on site, we, from day one, met with him because we knew the constraints were so difficult, just the geometries of the site. And then further, this is on septic, the septic field and what needs to be out there for septic is another consideration. These trees are beautiful. No one wants to take down the trees. The previous slide was showing a potential home that is in the heart of the lot that would require one coming down. So we showed that to show that we did go through an exercise, several exercises. We only showed 2 here tonight. And the buffer that's out here for the critical line, buffer, I don't know if they call it that, but it's, calls it a buffer, but anyway, it is planted with natural vegetation throughout the whole entire thing. And the goal, what we talked about with Eric from day one, was that he likely might recommend support from the city if we maintained in the other areas and maybe even added to with natural grasses and out there in that critical line. So we haven't gotten to that point, but that would be the goal. And just working hand in hand with Eric sort of showed us a path to being able to realize this home and still maintain the natural beauty that's out there. That's what we all want.
So if you were to, if the owner were interested in changing any of the natural area within that OCRM buffer area, would you have to go before OCRM?
I don't quite know how that works, and I know that what we were talking about doing is in the other extents, or what Eric was talking about doing is in the other areas of the buffer, the 10-foot buffer that's in between the critical line and the buffer, that we wouldn't put, say, just sod out there. It would be natural grasses and things that can absorb, that are meant to absorb whatever pollutants and stop those from getting into the estuary.
And just for information, I'm glad Dan pointed this out, but this is a septic field over here. And then here is the proposed well location for water. And there's a 75-foot DHEC septic setback from that, which is this line right here represents that 75-foot zone. So that further challenges how you build on the site.
And if any changes were proposed in the future, they would have to come before us again? If it would impact any of this that we're looking at right now as far as the setbacks?
Right, so the building footprint that encroaches into the setback, if you were to approve this request, that would be the extent of the encroachment that you would be approving. And any change
It's taking up almost all of
within that would require.
There's not much left to ask for.
How many linear feet is that pool? The length of that pool?
Don, I believe it's somewhere in the realm, Jesse Sandoli, owner on council today. I believe it's somewhere in the realm of 80 feet. There's a large chance we will have a building pool of that size based on costs these days. But I believe it's 80 feet. Like I said, a very good chance that that would turn into deck space. And to further answer your question regarding impacts, it would be strictly saltwater pool without any kind of treatment in it, even though it would be recirculating water. We would ensure that there be no pollutants whatsoever in terms of chlorine or anything like that.
How would you intend to mitigate impacts in the area where the building itself, which is adjacent to the pool, appears to be planned all the way to the setback line? I mean, it's covering the entire 10-foot setback area.
Roofs are pitched back towards the back of the property. So one is heading back to the road, not towards the estuary.
And does the neighborhood have a neighborhood association?
They don't.
Mr. Sweeney, did you try to come up with any building plans that did not result in either the removal of any grand trees or build into the setback?
So to clarify my role in this project, the answer to your question is yes. There were probably five different plans that were put forward. My role in this project is I've done other projects for both the owners here, and I've been an architect here for 30 years. The architect that has drawn these drawings is not local, and so I am a consultant on this and have been through this process before. So I've been aware on all Zoom meetings, I'm included on everything, but they're not my designs. So, but there were probably 5 different iterations, 2 of which the other.
I can speak to a couple of those. So the one design that didn't involve a variance or removal of the trees is just a far smaller, disjointed structure where the geometry gets very funky. As you can see, it's a pie-shaped piece of property. So as soon as you try to squeeze square footage into those areas that are buildable while conforming to the well stipulations and whatnot, it just becomes very strange structure. So we worked around that quite a bit, and ultimately it's just very tough. Like Eric pointed out when we met on site, since these lots weren't chopped up while in the city, the way that the trees fall is a little bit awkward. Like he pointed out, had they been chopped up in the city, they probably would have put that tree on a property line rather in the middle of the lot the way it stands now. So that's one of the reasons why we're up against a challenging situation there.
How long have you all owned this lot?
About 1.5 years now.
So if, so the owner mentioned that the pool area might not be, like a complete area might not be the pool area as it is showing on this design. It could possibly become deck area. What if they decide to have building area? Could they do that, or?
I guess that's a question that we have as a board is what if these are not final plans or if they are subject to change, are we approving a wholesale entry into the 10-foot setback, or are we approving them in accordance with this plan? Yeah. In other words, are we sort of abolishing the 10-foot setback from this property?
No, not abolishing it, but I would suggest maybe based on the discussion so far, maybe any approval could stipulate that the saltwater pool, the area shown here as a saltwater pool, could become deck maybe, but not a building, not a enclosed building. I don't know if that's acceptable to the applicant, but maybe that Is that what you're getting at? Is you don't want to see that become?
Well, what I'm getting at is I think we need to have some certainty as to what it is that the board is approving. And so if the board is approving a plan that affects and goes into the 10-foot setback area as shown on the plans that are attached to the application, then that's what we'll do. But then in the event that there's some change in the plans, I assume that they'd have to return with a new application item.
Well, yeah, I think that the extent of the encroachment can't increase beyond what's shown here without coming back to the board.
But what would be allowed to be buildable space is my question, within that 10 feet? I mean, what if that pool area becomes more area for the house? Or,
Well, if you don't want that to happen, you can stipulate that.
Stipulate that area, the area shown as the pool will not be enclosed space, is that
That'll not be habitable space.
or enclosed?
I'm looking at these elevations that they generated. Gosh, from the cold. And it's a little hard to see. I can tell here kind of where that pool and walkway area might want to be. But I share with you too, it's hard to understand the massing plan.
Yeah, so it's single story on pylons, and I'd just like to add, we've gone to really significant lengths to save these trees and even get to this point right now. So to approve this the way it is, we're totally happy with. We don't have any intention of building a structure in that area where the pool is. And to be frank, it would be quite awkward because it's only a 10-foot. There's not much we would be able to do with that if we were to take it to a third story. And we just don't want that much interior space. So the plans as drawn are really the way we want them.
Okay, and just to clarify one thing, because I think this is important too. So the first floor is elevated a full story off the ground, I think, right?
Correct.
And then you've got 1 story of conditioned living space above that.
Correct.
Right. So it's not a really tall house. It could be tall. It could be another story and a half. And the zoning may not doing a story and a half above what they're proposing here.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we're concerned about the height at all. What I'm really concerned about is if the board is inclined to approve, to give you relief, I want to be sure that we give you something that you can work with and
Sure.
that's suitable and that everybody can sort of call it a day and not have to come back before this board to deal with it again. So, to me, it would make sense to say that the area designated as the saltwater pool remains buildable for unenclosed space. Outdoor space.
We could add the stipulation for a screen. That would be ideal because the wildlife out there can be fierce in terms of the no-see-ups.
and now you're talking about the deck versus the porch, right? Okay, it just becomes more building.
Well, I'm really talking about, so there's an overhang on the right-hand side that.
Do we have a side view or profile?
I actually don't believe where I'm talking about is affected in what you guys are discussing.
Okay. I think we're just saying that pool's gonna be a podium and nothing above the podium.
Correct, that's correct. And that's the way it's drawn, and that's what we're happy with.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Lee or for the applicant or the owner? So, somebody want to try to make a motion with a condition?
Well, okay, that we approve this
Move to approve the variance on condition that.
There be no structure above the podium at the designated pool area.
That sounds pretty good.
Should we define what structure means any further, or is that, am I asking too much? Just-
Well, we've got a motion. We can now enter into discussion of the motion. And so what I would suggest maybe would just be some clarifying language on the condition. And I think we can refer to the plan submitted with the application. And I think we can designate the area as the area designated as the saltwater pool, that space will not be buildable and closed. It will be buildable, but it will not be enclosed space. So
that structure.
It'll remain outdoor space, I think is what Mr. Smith.
Okay. So with that further explanation of the condition, which I'll write it better than we can say it, but I think we've all got the picture here.
Just a point. They're probably going to be required to have a railing around it. So there will have to be a security railing for building code.
Around the pool.
Around that edge, because it's going to be an 8 to 10 foot drop at that, so there will be some sort of railing.
And
is that correct?
Yes. In order to hold water in the pool.
Well, the pool will go down. The pool's going to go actually down, and then it'll be flat, and then they'll have to be a railing.
I understand. It's hard to picture it with a profile without a profile shot, but I think we all understand what we're getting at here. So the pink area is going to be enclosed conditioned space. The blue area is going to be outdoor space. All right. So we have a motion with a condition. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Move to approve second with condition. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The variance is granted and will have the condition that saltwater pool area will remain outdoor space. Thank you. Okay.
Lucky you wouldn't put an amplified noise or anything.
Take up another hour of your time.
The restaurant works.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right.
Good to see you. Hello.
Good to see you.
How are you? How's your family? How old are they now?
Yeah, and I was just going to mention to Dan saying that the same thing.
Hello, Jim.
All right, friend. Always good to see you.
Hi, Robert.
I know Turner there.
Like we were just talking about where did you come from? We talked about how smart ours are. We're like,